Good evening. Welcome to Denver and the 2004 MUFON International UFO Symposium. We are really pleased with the turnout tonight, and we thank each and every one of you for being here. We hope you're having a good time. Are you? Good. It has only begun. We have an evening for you that should be interesting this evening, and then we have a series of talks tomorrow and Sunday that are out of this world, like our event was at Six Flags yesterday. We have three things we're going to do tonight. First, we're going to give some awards. We have to recognize some of these fine volunteers that have done things for us so much, so often, and called on so many times. We are then going to have a panel that's going to be moderated by Ken Storch, and Ken will introduce the panel members. Following that, we're going to have a DVD played for you that David Sereda brought in from Dan Aykroyd, because Dan can't be here. But Dan is a strong supporter of MUFON, and we really appreciate that support. We've needed that strong support for years. So we will do that after the panel is completed. To start this event, though, I want to read a proclamation. We at MUFON recognize the contributions that various groups make. One of the things that we have found over the years is that MUFON has a lot of women working in UFO research. About 1/3 of our population is women. 2/3 are men. We want to see that be 50-50. We believe that's the strongest way things can be done. So we have put together a proclamation for the coming year. It's a proclamation honoring women in UFO research. MUFON hereby honors women participating in UFO research by designating the year beginning on July 15th and running through July 14th, 2005 as the year of women in UFO research. The Year of Women in UFO Research program is a year-long program beginning on July 15th, designated to achieve the following purposes: increase citizens' awareness and understanding of women's past and present contributions to the work done in the UFO field, acknowledge women's specific contributions aimed at the resolution of the UFO mystery and the support they have given to people who have suffered abuse, ridicule, or harm as a result of their UFO encounters, and to develop opportunities for women to investigate, document, research, and present the results of their work in the UFO field. The anticipated program outcomes are as follows. We at MUFON expect the outcomes from this proclamation to include opportunities to publish research results in the MUFON UFO Journal, increase opportunities to investigate and document UFO sightings, increased numbers of women participating in this field, encouragement of other organizations to foster similar programs, and increased numbers of women's presentations at symposia worldwide. And it's signed John Schuessler, MUFON International Director, and that's today. We hope you will all support this program. I will have copies of this proclamation on the table, the MUFON table out front tomorrow, if you wish to have one. Now let's get on with the awards. We have eight people that volunteered to staff the new MUFON Business Board. And a couple of years ago, I think it was 2001 in fact, we looked at ways to change the way MUFON is doing business to improve things. It's not just a club to talk about UFO reports. It is more than a club. It's an organization that is aimed at doing research, aimed at doing documentation, aimed at fostering good investigations, aimed at doing a lot of good things. And we've had trouble doing that a lot of times because there's not been any money in this field, quite frankly. And all of you people out there have given your hearts and your time to make things happen. So we asked some people to become a business board to give us a business direction with MUFON. And I'd like those 8 people to come up here and come up that way and come across. James Carrion, Clifford Cliff, Tom Dooley, Jan Harzan. This one won't be here, but Bob Simpson, he's TDY to Iraq right now. Rob Switek, Tom Whitmore, and Dr. Bob Wood. You might say, what's so tough about being on a business board? Well, what's so tough about it is that we ask them to meet 4 times a year, to spend their own money to travel to do that, and to spend their own time, and every one of them is a very busy person. They have done that without fail, and they've come up, as you have seen in the MUFON Journal and on the website, they've come up with new initiatives, they've come up with a mission statement, they've come up with goals, and now they're doing the implementation on those goals, so we'll make sure things happen in the future. So congratulations to all of you.
John, I'd just like to say we've got to get some women on this board.
That is a goal, by the way. I would like, excuse me, I'd like Grant Cameron to come forward, please. Oh, excuse me, no, hold on that. Well, I have to hold that off because he'll be up here in a minute. I want to give some more awards. This man is not here. His name is Walter Webb. Walter has faithfully put a column in the MUFON Journal for the last 10 years on the starry night or the sky, where you can look to find the planets and anything else that's happening in the sky. Walter is stepping down from that position finally. He is worn out. But we have given him an award for that, and we appreciate it, and this will be sent to him. You all are the recipients of the MUFON UFO Journal. We have an editor that puts it out on time every month, month after month, whether he has material or not. He goes out and digs it out. And many of you have had your arms twisted to get that material. It'd be easier if you all got reports into him. Hint? Dwight Connolly, would you come up, please? Another man that's done a lot of work for us recently, we are getting now more videos on UFOs than we've ever got in our history. I mean, every day there is something that comes to us, either in the mail or through the internet. A lot of these things turn out to be flecks of dust that picks up light when the digital video picks it up. Some of them turn out to be birds with the wings fluttering, but some of them turn out to be things that we can't identify. And we have 2 individuals that have faithfully and on their own expenses dug into these things and analyzed them. One is Jeffrey Saino from Wisconsin. As far as I know, Jeff's not here tonight. Oh, is he here? I haven't seen him yet. Yay! The other is Dr. Bruce Maccabee. He said he didn't know he was going to be here, but we have ways of finding out, don't we? Another man that's done a lot for MUFON over the years, you all know him, Stanton T. Friedman. This is for outstanding service to MUFON in support of the organization's goals and initiatives, first off, and for recruiting new members worldwide. Every place he goes and speaking, he gives out MUFON literature and brings people in. And presenting the most papers at our annual symposiums.
Thanks, Is that quantity instead of quality?
Quantity instead of quality? No, it's quality. Another gentleman that is outside of MUFON that has done a lot of good things that we believe need to be recognized. For instance, yesterday, we went down to Fox Studios here in Denver, and we gave an award to a news person, Kim Posey. Kim has done more straight reported UFO reports and the news, the 9 o'clock news on Fox than anybody we've ever seen. She never puts a twist on it. She never ridicules anybody. She tells just the facts. And you've seen a number of the Colorado MUFON people on her show reporting the results of investigations, the real stuff. So we gave Kim an award at her studio. I had hoped we were going to have the film for that tonight, but I don't think we got it. But anyhow, we recognize that what the media does. There's another form of media, and that's documentary production. We have Kevin Berry here tonight. Kevin has produced, I think, 5 documentaries with UFOs as themes, 4 or 5. And he's done some of the straight reporting that we like to see. And you've seen so many documentaries where you say, I wouldn't want to have been in that one. Well, I've been in a couple of Ken's, and I'm proud to have been there. So, Kevin's, excuse me. And before the weekend gets going, I want to recognize our MC for the weekend, John Greenwald. Most of you know John already. He agreed to come to town and take over events down at Six Flags yesterday and to spend the whole weekend introducing speakers and guiding us through the weekend. And we're proud to have John here. Now, a little bit closer to home, I want to recognize the person that's put together our symposium proceedings for the last 3 years, Barbara Marr. That's writing a book every year. How many of you write a book a year? Had a lot of good help, though, because of all the neat people that we have speaking that provide papers. And I want to recognize the person that keeps me in this business. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here tonight because I couldn't do the job. It's my wife, Kathy. She does. We have a plaque for over 3 years of beating the numbers to death and the bookkeeping and all the mailings that you all get and the databases get you your journals every month, all the emails that come in and everything else. And she makes sure I don't forget things, and I do at times. So. And I don't have to introduce this person because you know she's running the symposium, Lynn Simpson. This is for outstanding performance in the MUFON 2004 International UFO Symposium as the chairperson and the recipient of the symposium proceedings dedication this year. Look in the front of your symposium. Lynn is there. A slightly different thing, we have a program that is aimed at lifetime membership in MUFON. We now have quite a few lifetime members. People have said, I believe in what you're doing enough that I'm willing to sign up to be a lifetime member and pay the fee for it. And we use that fee to do the work that you all see the results of. And each time someone signs up to be a lifetime member, they get a benefactor jacket. I'm going to show you one. Got our logo on it. It's an all-weather jacket. Take the lining out. You got a lightweight jacket. You can wear this up north because it's the super insulation type jacket. Our latest recipient is our Canadian Western Regional Director, Gavin McLeod, and he is here tonight. I wanted to give him his jacket in person in front of you all. That's the end of my dog and pony show. I'm going to turn it over to Lynn because she has a lot of hard workers that she wants to recognize.
First, though, I'd like to give out the T-shirts, the autographed T-shirts that we advertised that we were going to be giving out to the first 100 people who registered at the symposium, and the personal DVD player. So, Kira, I might be pronouncing this incorrectly, forgive me, or Kira Carrion Park. Is she here? No? Okay, well, she is one of the recipients of one of the T-shirts, and we will get that to her hopefully tomorrow. I don't know what package she picked, and if she isn't here, then we'll draw someone else and let you know. The second T-shirt goes to Amy Merkel. Amy, would you like to come and get this autographed T-shirt? I believe that's Dan's signature on there, but double check. I'm not sure, but it's autographed. Okay. The DVD player goes to Ray Rannick. Is Ray here? Oh, no. Okay, well, I guess we'll have to give that to Ray tomorrow, and if not, we'll draw another name. So I wanted to let you all know about those first. Now I'm going to recognize some of the hardworking volunteers here that have done so much to bring this symposium to you. So, all right, let me start with Randy Van Landingham. Randy? Yeah. Randy came to us not too long ago, did a study on us, and was really impressed and wanted to get involved. And so he is our collegiate membership person at Colorado MUFON. Thank you, Randy. Cornelia Yarrington, want to thank you for all your help. It takes a lot of people to make all this happen, so, and they all volunteer. Thanks, Cornelia. Ed Burke, where are you, Ed? Colorado's Assistant State Director, who runs meetings in Colorado Springs and helps tremendously with Colorado MUFON. I know we'll try and hurry here. Leslie Varnicle, State Director for Colorado. And I'll just kind of move along here a little bit. So, Ginger Sawatsky, maybe you can all just come up at once. Barry Roth, where's Barry? Oh, well, we'll just hand these out as we can. Gail Barton. Rebecca Hirsch, Ethan Rich, Carolyn Lawrence, who's worked tremendously hard on the registration desk. Okay. And I'll let, John, I'll just let you hand those out. Ken Storch. Alejandro Roja. Let's see, Troy's not here. Ty Simpson, come on up. Robert Rust. Rhoda Shirotis, and I don't think Rhoda's in here right now. Leo Grunk. Is Leo here? And Jim Edelman, I don't think is here right now. Jack Sawatsky. Jack's worked really hard for the vendors, getting all of that together for us. Judy Orsatti. Okay, and I think that's it for our volunteers. If you'll please let them know how much you appreciate their hard work.
You know, there's a hard-working crew here in Colorado MUFON, and I think when we volunteered to take on this job, they weren't quite sure what was going to happen, and I really want another round of applause for the Colorado MUFON staff. Without these people, I'd get lost as state director.
And one last award, and then we'll turn it over to our moderator and our panel. And John, you gave me such a lovely award, and I actually ordered a larger one than this, but I want you to know that we're all... It was a larger one than this. It was supposed to be. It really was. But we want to present this to John for his dedication to MUFON, missions and goals, and future vision.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. And now we want to get on with the next part of the program. I'd like Ken Storch to come up. He is a moderator for our panel, and he will introduce the panel members.
Good evening and welcome. I would like for the panel members to come on up. David Sereda, John Greenwald, I know you're out there. I'm going to be standing. Stephen Bassett. And we added a fifth member.
Grant might be ill. I think he took ill and had to retire.
Oh, he did?
Check, make sure.
Is Grant Cameron, are you out there? I understand. No?
I think he had to retire.
Okay. And John Schuessler. So we have four. I'm going to have each of the panel members give a little bit of background and what their specialty is, and then I'll introduce the subject. I'll lead this off. Excuse me. If it seems like I'm a little bit nervous up here, it's because I am. But I classify myself as an objective skeptic. I've always have been, and I continue that today. And I think part of that is because of my law enforcement background. I'm currently in law enforcement. I work for the city of Aurora. I was introduced to the MUFON problem, and I refer to it as a problem because it's a problem for us, it's a problem for the media, and it's a problem for the press. And through that experience that happened to me 30 years ago, it started my interest, and it's been that way ever since. So being a law enforcement officer, it causes me to be an objective skeptic. And it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago, had you have asked me, do I believe in flying saucers? I would have said, I don't know, the jury's still out on it. I can say now that, yes, I do believe in them, and yes, I do think they exist, and yes, I think they're coming here. So having that background and having that attitude, if you will, has caused me to look at the subject with a very critical eye. And I know that every light in the sky is not a flying saucer or a UFO. But one of the things that I respect about MUFON is that they go to great lengths to prove or disprove what's going on out there. And I think that's important. I think it's just important to report the facts as we find them. And if it turns out that it's not the real deal, then so be it. And to borrow a phrase from a gentleman that I have the utmost respect for, and that's Ted Lohman. He said, "You know, Ken, we want the truth. We may not like it once we get it, but we want it just the same." And I think that's very important. My first panel guest I would like to introduce is David Sereda. If you'll give a little bit of your background.
Well, starting in the beginning, I was born in Alberta, Canada, actually. In 1961, my family moved to Berkeley, California in the early 60s. 64, I was there with all my brothers. And that's when I saw my first UFO in about 1967. That's what started me out in all this. I was a little kid walking home from elementary school, and we see this classic disc-shaped object hovering in the sky. And back in those days, we used to watch Star Trek every day, so we thought it was the Starship Enterprise. And we pretended you could see U.S. Enterprise written on the side of it, but you really couldn't. It was just this shimmering steel at about 3,500 feet. And after about 20 minutes, it just blinked out. It disappeared and went into another dimension. And it's amazing how young I was at the time, but I never forgot that day. My mother got divorced and married a science teacher named David Cooper. My name became David Cooper at that point. And I literally followed every Apollo mission there was. I mean, I kept a scrapbook on every mission. My goal was to get into space, to get out there and get on one of those craft. The closest I've gotten is skydiving from 24,000 feet. Someday, I might get out there. That's where my interest began in the UFO phenomena. I grew up to be an environmentalist. I practiced meditation, and I've studied world religions. I've been doing meditation daily for over 25 years, developing my mind's ability to observe what's happening right in front of our eyes. Then I started working on environmental issues. I planted over 1 million trees, done oil spill cleanup, very devoted to the environment. So for me, what the UFO phenomena beckons our world with is the answer to this crisis we're all about to face. We're running out of oil. We have to get beyond fossil fuels. And it's just calling us with the answer. So I'm not just interested in just looking up and being amazed and trying to prove that they do exist. For me, on day one, 1967, these things are real. There's no one who can tell me what I saw that day was a flock of birds or anything that was some sort of an illusion. There was over 50 people on the street that day in the local neighborhood. So it's over from day one for me. This whole thing is real. I want to know how they work, how they operate. I went on to work with some of the top nuclear physicists in America and Russia. I was an assistant executive in nuclear fusion. I spoke in our Congress in 1993 on nuclear fusion with a panel of Nobel Prize and other award-winning physicists on helium-3 fusion. I'll go into a little bit of that tomorrow. I also worked most recently in bomb detection for Department of Defense, our business, a very new method of detecting explosives for airport and border security. I ran my own company called the Green and Blue Corporation, where I was raising funding for a lot of breakthrough technologies that would profoundly affect our environment. Most of it met with failure from the investment community. We had Nobel Prize winners supporting most of these technologies, and no one was interested. And again, because here we are, no one was interested for over 10 years in investing in those technologies. Once again, the UFO phenomena beckons us with the answer. So what I did in 1994, I was approached by Martin Stubbs, a program manager of a cable TV station in Vancouver, Canada, to study live NASA downfeed of what appear to be anomalous objects or UFO phenomena. I got so deep into the phenomena, watching the tape over and over again, I believe I can determine their propulsion systems, and it's not far-fetched. It's a very new theory in physics. I get calls from many people in our national labs who want to hear more about the work that I'm doing there, which you will hear a lot about tomorrow, and also possibly a connection to a star system. So I thought the investigation would be over very quickly. I didn't initially accept the idea that they were UFOs. I was able, one of the things I did in the UFO investigation at NASA is I didn't bother talking to PR people. I didn't bother speaking to department heads to get answers. I spoke to their top physicists because I know their language. And those guys love to talk. They're not...
No.
You get them going. Nobody calls those guys. The phone never rings. So they pick up the phone, or you send them emails, and if you know their language, they really like to talk. But you don't use the word UFO over there. You don't use it at the Air Force. You do process of elimination. You go through every known phenomena in the solar system until you arrive at UFO. You don't just show up there.
And excuse me a minute, David, and that's what we're going to talk about. Part of the subject tonight is how and why that terminology UFO is ridiculed and used as a tool to suppress research. I'd like to introduce the next panel and guest, Stephen Bassett, or Bassett. Am I pronouncing it Bassett?
Well, Bassett is the kind of snobby, which I use on occasion when...
And I knew that, okay.
But Bassett is... Well, first of all, I want to say that how pleased and honored I am that I was asked to present for the first time at MUFON's annual symposium. But more importantly, for many years, going all the way back in 1996, 97, I have stated publicly, repeatedly, that I felt it was absolutely essential that MUFON reassert itself as the world's dominant organization dealing with the subject matter. And I then went off and did my things, right? I made a decision at the very beginning of my work. I would join no organizations of any kind, none, because I did not want to be viewed as subjective or in favor of one group or another because of the nature of what I do. So I didn't pay attention. And I come here, right? And I walk in to this incredible hotel. And then I walk in, I see a life-size poster of Dan Aykroyd, right? And then I start to learn what John Schuessler is doing. And well, the first thing I got to say about John is that John is a lot younger than he looks. It is clear that he has brought a new vitality, a new vision to this organization and has big plans. And I am thrilled about that. And the fact is, I have my own thoughts about that, and I'm going to say a lot more on that subject regarding MUFON tomorrow in my presentation. Now, I'm coming at this from a little different perspective. I'm not a researcher, but I have a degree in physics, and I'm more than capable of assessing scientific analysis of things and Occam's razor and adding up A and B and getting C and all that stuff. But that's not what I do. I work from a pretty simple equation, and that is that the work of the members of NICAP and CUFOS and MUFON going back to 1958, without in any way implying that the investigation of this phenomena should stop, I can assure you, but that work has proven beyond any kind of doubt, reasonable, unreasonable, or otherwise, of the core fact of an extraterrestrial presence. We may not know where they come from. We may not know what they have for breakfast. We may not know their favorite rock star. But that they are here is beyond any question. That's point one. Point two, the United States government and other governments of the world are aware of this. They have considerable information about it, which they keep to themselves. And they have engaged the public in an interesting process of hide the ET, and have come up with all kinds of new catchphrases like need to know and don't ask, don't tell, and so forth and so forth. Which brings us to the area of my interest, which is the politics of what used to be called UFOs, then it became the politics of disclosure, and will eventually be called exopolitics. And the reason it's important is not because I want to go to the stars, which I do, if I can get one of those 2-week advanced Saturday overfares, you know. But I can't go regular rate, but I'm ready to go under discount. And not because I don't want to know all this stuff, but because when I got in the field in 1996, after the years went by, I was surprised to learn something I didn't expect. That the cover-up of this subject, as it has worked its way through the military intelligence complex, and the parallel development of what I call the secret empire, where this secret is held along with a lot of other things, is way out of control, and in my view, jeopardizes the constitutional republic of the United States. And that we've learned that because of this issue. And so, disclosure now is not just the vindication of MUFON. Disclosure is an absolutely essential process to the reform of the results of the Cold War, the restructuring of key elements of our government, and a return to openness and balance, which is absolutely critical if this century is going to go well.
Well said. Our next panel guest, I've gone to his website on numerous occasions, and I find it absolutely fascinating, and he also paid me to say that. John Greenwald, Jr.
Thank you. My story is a little bit different. I started when I was 15, and it's been 8 years now. I just turned 23 in April, and it's been a long trek, I guess you could say. When I first started, I wasn't driven by a sighting or an experience or something exciting to tell you. I only have one word that really describes why I got into this and why I even keep going, and that's curiosity. When you deal with the unknown, that's why you and I are here. I'm here to share the information I found, but I'm here to learn as well. And I've, 8 years ago, if you would have asked me that Mr. John Schuessler would ask me to MC this event, and Lynn Simpson would ask me, and I would have said you were nuts. And I am honored to absolutely accept that offer and to do that this weekend. But it's been a long 8 years. I've used the Freedom of Information Act to uncover over 140,000 documents, or pages of documents, throughout the and I've scanned 100% of those online. I just moved. I finally got my own one-bedroom, and in that process, I finally moved all of my documents. And with blisters after I was all done on all of my hands, because I did it all by myself, I didn't trust anybody else touching them, I reorganized them and found out that I actually have one full filing cabinet of documents that haven't even made it online yet. So that's a good few thousand more. But here I am, and the Black Vault has risen to doing record-breaking months consecutively from February all the way to June. Unfortunately, hackers decided to take me down about a month and a half ago. I lost about 4 months worth of work in some areas, and that's the joys of working in the digital realm, is you learn sometimes the hard way that your backups aren't working correctly. And it happened again 2 weeks ago. But if you try to get to the site in the last couple of days, it's been damaged. But I'm happy to say that about 5 hours ago, I did get it all back online. There's a lot of history to it in the last 8 years. I can, get up here and talk for hours, and I know John doesn't want me to do that because he's next. But in closing, I'm continuing this trek. In the last 60 days, I've filed over 250 Freedom of Information Act requests to every corner of the government on various different subjects. So as you can tell, they know me very, very well.
Our next panel member probably doesn't need any introduction, but there may be one or two out there that doesn't know who John Schuessler is. John?
Thank you, Ken. You know who I am because I was up here a minute ago. Remember that guy over there? Well, the guy has a serious side, too. I became involved in the UFO field in 1965. And many of you weren't born then yet, I know. And we're proud of that, to have the younger members here that may not have been around when I got involved. But I became involved as a result of working in our nation's space program. I worked 36 years in human space flight, starting with the Gemini program right up through the International Space Station. I'm very proud to have worked with those people at JSC. The last 25 years were spent at JSC. And I did not work for NASA, by the way. I worked for McDonnell Douglas and Boeing. We had contracts to support NASA's programs. And during the Gemini program, I was in design. My design job was the life support system on Gemini. And I still remember the name of the number of the specification, 52-83700. Isn't that something? We lived the space program in that detail, though, night and day to get a spacecraft off of the ground. And that's part of my point. On Gemini 4, General James McDivitt was the pilot. Ed White was the co-pilot. They were on orbit, and Jim said, I see something up here. I'm going to try to get a shot of it. I'm not going to go through the whole story tonight because in my paper tomorrow, I'm going to give you the actual transcript. Now, this wasn't a flying saucer. This was something in space that some people thought at first was a large satellite. It turned out that was too far away. They thought it might be a booster. He knew where the booster was. You know, these astronauts are not dummies. They are rocket scientists. They know when they see something. And it impressed me because here we worked years to get Gemini built and all the pieces that went together in the life support system. And I was listening to this downlink at the time, monitoring the environmental data. And that just piqued my interest. How can something be there when we worked so hard to get a spacecraft up? And that started my quest for information. It wasn't long that I got introduced to the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization by Walt Andrus. How did I get to Walt Andrus? Well, my father was a railroad engineer. And he worked at the time in the switching yards at Quincy, Illinois. And Quincy, Illinois is where Walt Andrus lived. And the fireman that worked with my dad square danced with Walt and his wife. And one day, my dad said, you wouldn't believe what my son's doing. He's looking at flying saucers. And the guy said, oh, that's nothing. Walt Andrus does it all the time. Then about 3 days, I had a letter from Walt, and it started a long relationship. We both were in APRO. APRO got disenchanted with having people in the field trying to do something, and so we broke off and formed MUFON. It was the Midwest UFO Network. And it wasn't long before people outside the Midwest said, we want to be part of it. So we became the Mutual UFO Network so we could keep the same acronym. It's been going ever since. And every day since then, I found something intriguing about this mystery. I tell you, it is uncanny the things you uncover, the connections you find, the number of reports, the possible technology in the reports. And of course, that was my interest, is the technology. I still don't think we should be using fire-breathing rockets to get off the ground. I think we should be doing it like we're seeing in the UFO field. And my friend Alan Holt worked with me. He's a NASA employee, and we have talked about this many times. He's an expert in advanced propulsion, way beyond what we're doing, but nobody listens to him. And he's got the answer. And I hope some of you will support that kind of work in the future. Anyhow, we're up to today. And tomorrow we're going to have a bunch of papers that give you evidence. And the first thing we're going to start with, I'm going to give you the definition of evidence. Lots of people say, well, there's no evidence of UFOs. That's ridiculous, folks. We've got lots of it. The problem is we don't have it in a body that we can come up and say, here's 2,000 tons of it. I got a piece, it's in my basement, it's in my backyard. I got some of the reports in my file, but you can't have them. That's got to stop. And that's what I'm saying for tomorrow.
This evening, one of the things that we're going to talk about.
I'm not going to talk
I'm sorry.
anymore.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say, never has there been a major project in this world that has accomplished things in technology that hasn't been done in a unified manner with all kinds of people of all backgrounds and all walks of life, every nation involved in the world, every type of person. And that's what we need in this UFO field. And that's what I push for personally. Some of you may agree or disagree, but that's where I am.
Good job, John. You can upstage me anytime you want. That's fine. One of the things that fascinates me about this topic is the giggle factor and the ridicule that comes along with it. And having been in the law enforcement field, I've experienced it firsthand. In fact, I've been told by individuals within the police department that I'm doing the devil's work, that this is not going to enhance my career. And when I came out of the closet, there were comments like, oh, Storch, I can't believe you. And there was all kinds of innuendos and ridicule. Fortunately, I have a wonderful sense of humor, and I gave it back just as much as I took. And I think that's important from the UFO community, and that's what I want to explore tonight, is the giggle factor and the ridicule that comes along with it, because what that does, it suppresses people. It suppresses serious research, and it suppresses serious investigation. People are reluctant to come forward. And I'm talking about professional people as well as the common person also. I know from doing some documentaries that we ran into some very, very professional people, astrophysicists at various universities that would talk to us off camera, but they wouldn't go on camera. They didn't want to jeopardize their career. In fact, one lady told us quite frankly that they receive $11 million a year from the federal government, and if she went on camera and told what she really thought about flying saucers, she'd lose it, and possibly her position with the university. And that's pretty serious. A simple word, flying saucer, several words, would destroy somebody's career. And it wasn't always like that. If we go back, and we're going to let our panel explore that, but if you go back to the 40s and 50s, there was a thirst for knowledge. The press clamored for people that saw things. They wanted to know about it. The press asked questions. In fact, they were hammering the military, i.e. the Air Force and the government, for answers. And somewhere along the line, that ridicule, that giggle factor came in, and I don't know if it was by accident or if it was on purpose or a combination of the two. But we'll start with John, since he's done some, excuse me, and there's two Johns up here, so I better differentiate here real quick. The younger John. Mr. Greenwald, to me, exactly. Through your research and through your documents that you uncovered, did you notice anywhere where it took that turn, where there was a specific event or a specific time frame in which the giggle factor, the ridicule crept in and took over?
I don't think there's really a turning point to where the giggle factor became a factor. I think, when that thirst for knowledge was apparent way back, going back to the 40s and 50s, you had two things. You had a lot of UFO sightings. If you look at graphs throughout the 40s, there's this huge wave of, an exponential amount of UFO sightings versus the past years. But the other thing was there was an ever-increasing number of sci-fi flicks of those crazy aliens and just all those cheap flying saucers flying in the air. So you had it two ways. So as time passed, and the U.S. government said, well, we're officially investigating this, and we're really looking into this phenomenon with Project Blue Book, and then Blue Book closed, and they gave their fantastic explanation for what the UFO phenomenon was. Like, we all know that the planet Venus travels Mach 4 and does right-angle turns. We started asking that question of, well, wait a minute here, what's going on? Well, the media took the combination of those cheesy B films of the sci-fi age, combined that with people really researching that phenomenon. Come on, it was a joke. So I think then that really sparked some of the giggle factor remarks, when they would cut back to Bob in the studio, back to you, then he would have some kind of cheesy remark to say. And one thing that I pointed out in the press conference today is I felt, and I've never really seen, that the reporter, the one that actually is out there taking notes, sitting in this audience maybe, or going out there and seeing a lecture, or even making a phone call to an actual researcher, it's never that person that's making the joke, not the one that looked into it seriously. It's Bob back in the studio sitting at the desk that had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Those Bobs.
There's always a Bob.
There's always a Bob.
There's always a Bob. Whatever network we're dealing with, there's a Bob. So it's Bob's to blame. If there's any Bobs in the audience, I'm sorry. But I think that's a valid thing, is that it was the people that did not do the research that had those jokes. And as time passed, not only did you have the cheap, cheesy B films, but then you had the jokes starting. Well, one network, is not going to follow seriously if another network's making fun of it, so why not add their own jokes? And then I think it kind of spread like wildfire, and sooner or later, you just had the giggle factor went along with the UFO phenomenon. And I think it's stuck ever since. I don't see it ever really going away from those who honestly don't care to really research the phenomenon other than those journalists who take it seriously. I believe this stuff belongs in documentaries and news stories, obviously without all that ridicule, but unfortunately, I just don't know if it's going to happen.
Steve?
Well, historically, first historical comment, and then I'll tell you what I'm trying to do about that issue. I believe the first ridicule, giggle issue emerged with the Space Brothers in the early 50s. It's very likely that some of those individuals were in fact abductees who were confronting their situation with an absolute zero basis of knowledge and comparison, utterly confounded. I think some of them were put up by the government early on to get out there and mess with this issue, because by then MJ-12 was in force, most of the structures were in force, and they started, so the process starts there. So having said that, I am been going to great effort to get a concept out into the public arena. I've talked about it, some of you have heard it, I'm going to restate it. I believe, for me, it's the best explanation. Down through history, governments have repeatedly used this technique. If you have an idea, or if you have a segment of the population or any component of your society that you need to minimize, there are a number of things you can do. One, you can just kill everybody, right? But what is often done is that you ghettoize it, right? You create a ghetto. And what does it mean? It means you create a defined space. If you're talking about people, you put real walls up. And you take everybody that you want to minimize and you stick them in there. You force them in there. All right. And this has been done. We don't have to go into this. You all know about this. You all know this has happened in our century, the last century, quite a bit. But what if it's an idea? What kind of wall do you put around an idea? Simple. A wall of ridicule. And that's what the government did, brilliantly so. It said, what we have to deal with is not a B-2 bomber that we're going to keep secret from everybody because we're going to build it underground and nobody's going to know about it. This is not a secret. How can it be a secret? These things are flying all over the place, right? And we can't stop that, right? We could be giving a press conference. It's like what's his name? Baghdad. What was his name? Baghdad Bob? Who's Baghdad?
Bob.
It's Baghdad Bob. Bob. You remember the press conference he was giving when he was saying, I tell you, there is no Americans in Baghdad. Absolutely none. We killed them all outskirts. And while he's saying this, American tanks are like passing behind him on camera, as they go by.
I love that guy, by the way. I really did.
He's still alive, by the way. He's still around, and I predict he'll eventually be a guest on Letterman and really have a fine life here. But the point is that the government knew they could be going out. They could go out and they could give a powerful press conference. We have done extensive research, and we can assure you that there's nothing anomalous in the skies. And while they're saying this, there's things flying overhead. You see, they can't stop. So what are you going to do? How can you contain the uncontainable? They said, well, we'll use a technique that's been used for thousands of years. We're going to create a ghetto around this issue. We're going to put walls of ridicule, and everybody that touches it goes in there.
Steve, can I ask you a question? And just not to interrupt, but to interrupt. Do you know of a specific incident or a specific time frame when that took place? Because it wasn't like that back in the 40s and 50s, or at least the early 50s.
But it was, absolutely. The entire Space Brother phenomena, okay? And if you've ever seen some of the interviews of that time, it's beyond the pale. It's unbelievable, right? Now, we can be generous, right? But the point is that wasn't an accident, all right? It was not an accident. So if you're, look, the government deliberately put stories in the tabloids as soon as there were tabloids. Why do you think they did that? It's so easy. You just call them up and give them a story, all right? That creates the ridicule wall. You get somebody to go out and say, oh yeah, I was picked up by a flying saucer and I was taken to a Walmart on Mars. Ridicule factor. They started right from the get-go. You've got to understand this. I say you don't. I say you have to. Look, you understand plenty. America has to understand it. Ted Koppel has to understand it, so they can sort of understand how it's possible that this thing is still going on. But let me get to the key point here. This is nasty business, right? Because what they do is every person goes in that ghetto. It doesn't matter whether you have a PhD from MIT, Edgar Mitchell, or you walked on the moon. Doesn't matter if you have a Pulitzer Prize, John Mack. Doesn't matter how many degrees you have, how smart you are. You go in that ghetto, and that's where you are. When John Mack entered this field in '92, he went in that ghetto instantly, and his life has never been the same. And they stand on the ghetto walls after they've stuck you in there, where you're cut off from universities, and you're cut off from the mainstream acknowledgement of the press, you're cut off from funding and philanthropy, and you're on your own, and things just sort of deteriorate. You know what I'm talking about, folks? And they get a little dicey, and the money runs out, and you have a divorce, and you're just getting a little ragged. And then the government gets up on the walls and points down in the ghetto and says, you see what a mess they are? That's why we have to keep them in this ghetto. You get it? It's a tautology. There is a wall of ridicule around this. You didn't create it. The government created, using a number of tactics, which included direct subversion. They put CIA operatives on the NICAP board of directors and brought the organization down. They set up James McDonald at the SST conference, and thanks to some other problems in his life, caused his suicide. They have done what was necessary to keep this issue managed. The wall of ridicule is a government construct, and your job is to tear it down.
David, can you, through your research or with your contacts, do you know of a specific incident or time frame in which the giggle factor or the ridicule came into play?
Well, in my own work, let's just start with Mexico. I like to kind of turn the table because we can laugh at them, on this issue. I think one of the things the government hates is that we're getting smarter and smarter all the time. The seriousness of the researchers, when you go even to Bob Brown's conferences in Laughlin, I feel like that's university for me. I come out of there and I got a degree. I know how to think. I know how to look at a crop circle from a different perspective. They hate that. And their universities, let's talk with Mexico, just for an example, the recent sightings in the infrared. It's they who came up with swamp gas and ball lightning, not us. They're the ones who said those ridiculous theories, and possibly someone from Canada said balloons, which is an answer you get all the time. How did 11 balloons surround and chase these aircraft? We'll never know. They're coming up with those answers. I think we're at the point now where we are getting so educated into aerial phenomena. Everyone in this room knows that you don't need an IQ of 4 or higher to know that none of the explanations our universities came up with on Mexico are plausible. So that's step number one, is getting educated and understanding how aerial phenomena actually work and understanding propulsion systems and how they work. But even recently, after Mexico happened, because a lot of my work goes into invisible photography on space shuttle missions, looking in the ultraviolet and infrared, where many anomalous phenomena show up, I've done at least 8 or 9 radio shows on it, and some of the shows called me up and they wanted to make fun of me and the whole thing, one from Seattle in particular. And halfway through the show, I just hung up the phone, shut them down. And that's what we have to do. When television or radio wants to mock us, they want you to swim like a dog, trying to stay on the top of the water. And they're just throwing jokes at you. All you have to do is hang up the phone. That's all you have to do. It's that easy. And that's just fighting back. I think that more and more media is getting more and more open to the phenomena. I think the last person who's going to be convinced that there is a UFO phenomena going on or going to admit it, is the President of the United States and Congress. I think these organizations are getting so powerful that every citizen in the United States of America will be convinced, as in a court of law, before Congress will even breathe a word, before you'll hear a word out of the Air Force. Why do we need them to make that statement for us when we can decide for ourselves?
Well said, David. John?
I guess I'd like to pose a question to you on this. Do any of you ever bother to look and see why each television station broadcasts exactly the same news within seconds every time they have a newscast? They're all independent? No. You look and see who owns the majority of the station. Look and see who connects the control of the news that's put out and look and see who they support with their funds. And you will find that it's a very small circle. So it's very easy to control access of that type. You'll find that that's on the major news scale. On the local news scale, it's quite different. Quite often you have a lot of very honest people. As long as they don't get off the farm, they do a good job. And we've had that luck here in Denver with some of the news people. They've been very factual, very responsible. This has not been national news, though. Now, second thing, you say, well, the politicians, they probably don't know because nobody told them. That's not true either. The Disclosure Project let every politician know that they could let know what has gone on. They brought forth people that worked in government jobs that had all of the background in the UFO field as well, and the politicians still didn't pay attention. There were no votes attached to it, by the way. About 2 years ago, one of our members, George Zeiler, he and I went to see our local representative. And we did that because George at the time was investigating a very good case here in Colorado called the Stan Romanek case. Stan took some photos. It was in the congressman's district. So we went and told the congressman, we're going to blow this wide open. Now, we want you to know about it. We're not blindsiding you. You're our representative. And he had his science advisor in the room with us. We thought he'd say, oh, get out of here. But you know, he didn't. He said, he started asking us questions. He had the Disclosure Project information. His science advisor had that information in hand. His science advisor had read it in detail and could quote it back to us. The congressman then said, well, what about the mutilations that's going on down in the San Luis Valley? Have you got a control on that? We said, we got people, I didn't say Ken, but people that have gone down there and looked into this, and Kevin. He said, well, what about this and what about that? Turned out this man really knew what was going on in the UFO world. And then he said to us, he said, what do you want me to do about it, and what do you think I can do about it? We didn't expect that question, and we didn't have an answer. So when you get asked, have an answer what you expect them to do about it.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, John has brought up something very significant here. Disclosure press conference, May 9th, 2001. Prior to that conference, full report on the witness testimony, along with the tape, was hand-delivered to every single member of the House and Senate. I know because I handled one of the buildings. I think it was Cannon. You see, this is still an open country. Even now, I've done something like this similar after 9/11. So you still can do it. You can go and you can go to the office buildings of the House and the Senate, and you can walk around. Walk in any office you want. So I get the cart filled with boxes of reports and tapes, and I walk up there and I take a look at it, and okay, I run it through the thing, and I just cruise up and down the halls and hand these things out. Now later on, I found out because I have contacts in the Hill that yeah, some of these things were seen. They listened. They review the tape. Okay. I've gone up and down the halls. I took Terry Hansen's book, Missing Times, hand-delivered it with a cover letter to all the key chairmen of certain committees. I did something similar to Richard Dolan's book. We've been talking to him one way or another for years. And plus, you know, they go home, they watch Discovery Channel, they've seen the documentaries. There was a time you couldn't turn on Discovery or History without a documentary on extraterrestrial phenomena. They know. So what's the problem? Because I can't resist doing this, okay? I know exactly what the problem is. You see, they know that they can watch that documentary and they can read that book and they can have a private chat with me, but the moment they stand in front of any camera and utter the word UFO, they are going in the ghetto. And they can't go there. So you see how effective it is? It's really effective. And so you tear it down in lots of different ways. Referring to David, I'm a little different than David, right? If I get on a show, David hangs up. I don't blame him. I've been tempted a few times. Let me tell you, folks, if I ever get on a television show, one of these, firing lines, hard ball, softball, whatever, And I get on that show, and they start tossing me some of these stupid-ass questions. I hope you're watching, because you are going to hear and see some things you have never seen before on television.
That ridicule, that giggle factor, you know, we talk to each other and we say the government, we say the press, but I've experienced it on a personal level. There's not a month that doesn't go by that when I go into my office, I'll have tinfoil around my mailbox. I'll have little alien figurines stuck on my patrol car. My locker downstairs where I change into my uniform is inundated with E.T. And you know which locker belongs to K.W. Storch when you walk in. For you ladies, when you walk in, you go, oh, that's his locker right there. And I'm blessed with a good sense of humor, and I take it in stride. And like I said before, I give it back just as much as I take. But some of it turns very serious. For instance, hey, you're doing the devil's work. This is not a career-enhancing move you're doing, Ken. You're not going to make chief of police if you keep chasing little green men. And I keep telling them, hey, they're not green, they're gray. And that's on a personal level. And I guess what I'm trying to say and direct to the panel is, yes, I know there's ridicule and there is innuendos in the press, and it is a very effective tool. Yes, the government is very good at doing that. But on a more personal level, you walk out of here on the street and start talking about flying saucers. And by the way, if you notice, I use that term more than UFO. All right, UFO is a government term that they gave us, and it sanitizes and it allows another segment of our society to talk about it because it's unidentified. But when somebody sees a craft and I investigate the case and I say, well, what did you see? Well, I saw a metallic object. And, well, what did it look like? Well, it was a disc shape. It was about 20 feet across, about 8.5 feet thick, and it didn't make any noise. Well, you know what? That's not a UFO. That's an identified object. You saw a flying disc. Call it that. Unfortunately, the term UFO allows us to say it without flying saucers. Because when I use the term flying saucer, and about a month ago, 2 months ago, several of us were on Peter Boyle's show on Inside Colorado. And David was talking about what he had seen in California when he was a young man. Not that you're not a young man now, guy, but younger man. And Peter Boyles turned to me and he said, Ken, what did he see? And I said, he saw a flying saucer, because his description was very accurate and very vivid. For just a brief second, there was a smirk on Peter Boyle's face. There was a little grin on the side of his face, and I wanted to address that immediately to him. That was not the form or the time to do it, and I understood that. But it's important that we, in the ufology movement, confront that openly on a personal level. I think it's very important. One of the things that I use when somebody goes, oh, little green men, huh? And I said, you know what? The only reason why you say that is two reasons. It's either out of fear or ignorance. I can help you with the ignorant portion of it. The fear you're going to have to take care of. And that's how I deal with it. So one of the questions that I want to pose to the panel up here is, and if they're willing to, have you ever experienced it on a personal level, whether it was in your professional life or in a personal life and just a natural setting? And I think it's important that we understand that it's not just the media, it's our peers also, and it's important that we deal with it. And we'll come back to the media aspect of it and how we might be able to overcome that aspect of it. David, I'll start with you first.
Well, I'll just say, because of the level of physicists that I used to work for on fusion, and I did fundraising, and I also had to study physics like crazy to be able to communicate nuclear fusion work that is going on. When I told some of my bosses, like Dr. Bogdan Castle-Magwitch, MIT physicist, that I was doing UFO research, and I told him there really are, strange things going on in these shuttle tapes, he was just very quiet, very, very silent. When I tried to send the tapes to Murray Gell-Mann, who won the Nobel Prize in '62, who was also an associate of our advanced physics group in Irvine, California, he declined absolutely. Just no way in the world is he going to comment on UFOs. James Rorsborough, I just met recently, a physicist from UCLA. They just flat out say, they have their reasons why they don't take the phenomena seriously, and I'll get very deeply into that tomorrow night, but all of them, it's just a shut down issue. So to experience it on a personal level, I personally when you're searching for the truth, you can't care what anybody thinks. If you're looking for the absolute truth, whether it's about God, spirituality, or an unidentifiable phenomena, or even psychological phenomena, you can't care at all. You can't take it personally. So, I experienced the rejection on that level, even when I told Dave Cooper, my stepfather, that I had seen a UFO in Berkeley, and he's a science teacher. He just was very nice and just shrugged it off. That's a negativity, because they're not taking you seriously. They're not sitting down with you and really, getting into your experience. But I never cared. I'm looking for the truth, the absolute truth. For me, it's not is the phenomena real, it's how do they work, because I want to fly. That's what this is all about. We want to get out into the stars. We don't want to just look up and watch other people doing it. That's why I skydive. So, I'm not afraid. I can take all the abuse in the world.
I'll keep that in mind, David.
Okay.
The older John, I know that you worked in the aerospace industry, and how was this received on a personal level, on a professional level within your colleagues?
I would have to address that by the year, because it changed from time to time. When you work in aerospace, you usually work a project. A project comes to an end, you start another one, and you're starting with all new people, and they may be your peers, your subordinates, or your bosses, and so you got to retrain them. I trained them. When I got involved in 1965. By 1972, I was pretty vocal. We had an airliner incident out of St. Louis, and Walt and I met with the pilot and talked to him. He was so irate that he had gotten the idiot treatment that he wanted to talk. And what had happened, I shouldn't get into long stories, but what had happened, he was asked by the FAA to check out a UFO over one of the cities in Missouri. He did that, and it flew away from him, and they told him on radar it was moving. It went. And when he landed and took the plane in, he went up to the control tower and said, "I'd like to talk to the radar operator." And they said, "Radar wasn't working tonight." The old radar wasn't working story. And he was mad. So I went on television with him on Channel 4, which was KMOX in St. Louis. And about 2 days later, my supervisor, my department head, called me in. He said, "John, we just don't talk about UFOs in this business." He said, "It's just not good for your job." And I looked at him and I said, "Why?" And he tried to explain. And I said, "Well, I'm in it. I'm doing the job for you. Am I doing anything wrong with my work?" And he said, No. And he kept promoting me. And about 6 months later, I was asked by the vice president of engineering at McDonnell Douglas to come in and give him a UFO briefing. I never heard a thing out of that supervisor again. And I gave this man briefings until I left St. Louis on about every 2-week basis on what was happening in the field. And why was he interested? He was director of engineering. He had heard that we had found pieces possibly of UFO. Well, how would you make the metal? What would you do? He was a real engineer, even though he's a manager, he wanted to know how it could be done. Exactly what I wanted to know. And then soon after that, I was transferred to the Johnson Space Center to work for McDonnell Douglas down there. And you know how I got down there? It wasn't because I was a brilliant recipient of NASA work. It was that I worked on the proposal for the support to the space shuttle program, the support contract, and I spent quite a bit of time going back and forth. And I knew a lot of the folks at Johnson Space Center because I worked with them on Gemini. And after we turned the proposal in, One of the people that worked in the Space Shuttle program office at a high level, and I'm not going to say his name, I wouldn't want to embarrass him, he mentioned to one of our vice presidents that he knew John Schuessler, and John Schuessler was interested in UFOs. The vice president called me in and said, wouldn't you like to transfer to Houston? And I said, no, I don't want to go to Houston. He said, your job's in Houston. So is that ridicule? No, it's not. It's how you present yourself on this a lot of times. If you find somebody that's such an idiot that they can't look at data, or such an idiot that they can't converse on the subject, write them off and move on to the person that can.
Well said. There is wisdom in what you say, John, absolutely. John?
I think I would have to lean towards more of a personal experience than a professional experience with the ridicule, and I would have to say that I was fairly lucky with that angle of all this. Like I said before, I was 15 when I started this. I was a sophomore in high school. And there's not many sophomore in high schools that are writing letters to the CIA and the NSA and getting phone calls from the Pentagon, and they didn't really know that I was in school, and they would always talk to my mom, and she'll be the first to tell you she was a little freaked out the first time that the CIA called. But not many people knew about this. And to be quite honest, my parents didn't even know the magnitude of what I was doing, just on how serious I was.
There's a lesson in that, folks, for your children.
Watch what they do. Yeah. I started this website and started getting this research, but no one really knew about it. Like I said, my parents didn't even really know the magnitude of how serious I was in doing this. And a couple of radio shows. Art Bell was one of the first ones. Jeff Renz picked me up. I was 17 when I think I first did Art Bell, and 16 when I did Jeff Renz for the first time. My parents thought it was cool. They didn't think much about it. But then NBC showed up. And this was for Whitley Strieber's 2-hour confirmation, and that was kind of the biggest thing that really kind of set me in the black vault, kind of from 0 to 6,000 miles an hour. But like I said, no one at my school knew about this. Not even really my close friends. I never really talked about it. So when NBC showed up at my school to do what's called B-roll, where you're just walking around and they're getting shots or whatever, everybody started looking over and seeing this camera crew with all this lighting and everything, and they're filming me. So people started asking questions, but again, I kept it down to a minimum until the show aired. And somebody tipped off the principal, and they announced it on the PA system, and then everybody knew. And I was that guy that was writing those letters to the government, and they all saw me on that NBC show. But you know what? The reception was unbelievable. Everybody thought it was great, even teachers. I was put in the Daily News. I had a big picture in the Daily News in Los Angeles. And the teachers would actually put it up in the classrooms. And it was really kind of praised. This was a Catholic private school. So that, I should have threw that in there earlier. It was a Catholic private school, and they were very receptive to one of their students who questioned a lot of stuff, not only about UFOs, and asked those tough questions that kind of upset a few of the teachers. But they put the article up, and they were very receptive. And so it was all the friends and students and my people I didn't even know. I met a lot of people after that too. So I would have to say that I'm rather lucky, and going away from the professional experiences, that would be one of my personal ones when I was a sophomore. And I think it actually aired when I was a junior. But
that example, John, proves there's hope yet that this lid's going to blow off. Because if a Catholic school, and I know a little bit about the Catholic schools myself, that if they're that receptive and have that open-mindedness to allow the knowledge, then it's going to happen. Steve?
I can just imagine John's parents commiserating with each other, saying, "We just wanted a normal kid." A kid likes fast cars, loud music, tattoos, body piercing.
That's right.
But instead,
we got the CIA.
Get a teenager who's on a first-name basis with the CIA. I entered the field in '96 when it was pretty ripe. So nobody has ever attempted to humiliate me or ridicule me in public, though I wish they'd try. And in fact, I get the occasional email, the anonymous email. That's no big deal. But I can relate a few things to you, right? One of the most notable was that there was a writer for the Washington Post that I thought a lot of. He's a good writer, named Joel Achenbach. And I met him, I interviewed with him. He came out to my office. Smart, has a family, wife, couple of kids. He's sort of like he's a humorous person. I mean, he's a humor writer, a satire, and so forth. But he also does politics, and he likes science. In fact, he wrote a book on extraterrestrial life. And I tried my best to win over Joel Achenbach. I had about as much luck as I had winning over the cheerleaders in high school. At the May 9th press conference, which had 100 press and 17 camera crews, and 21, I think, witnesses, including quite a few members of the military, and a tape of 60 other witnesses. The Washington Post did not send a news reporter. They sent Joel Achenbach. And Joel did a humor piece on the May 9th press conference. Joel doesn't know it, but that was the biggest mistake he ever made in his life, because that piece is there. It will always be there. And in due course, it will be the most embarrassing thing that he ever did. So that was a disappointment. And I've lost a couple of friends. Just couldn't adjust. And my family, I have an extended family, but my family has a certain, how would you say, quiet tolerance for me, meaning that he hasn't committed any felonies.
None that they know about.
But ain't no way I'm getting any loans, you know what I mean? Right? Because they're saying that there's no business here. I mean, there's no future in this, so we're not loaning Steve anything. But on a much more serious note, and this has happened, I'll relate a story that I think very few have ever heard. When I was in Cambridge, spending some time at PEER, Program for Extraordinary Experience, I had a chance to talk with John Mack a couple times. And he told a story to me once. This is early on. This is like, he enters the field after he meets with Bud Hopkins, who was here tonight. And Bud, well, I got to tell this story. This is a great story. I got to tell the story. Can I tell the story?
Go tell the story.
Bud will confirm this. So, I mean, I have the person here who can confirm this story, so this is quality stuff here. Okay. It's like that scene in the Woody Allen movie, where somebody's arguing about Marshall McLuhan, and he knows they're an idiot, so he walks over and pulls Marshall and McLuhan over, and Marshall tells the person in the line there at the movie that they're an idiot. Life is never like that. The point is that Bud's here to cooperate. John Mack had been bumped about this issue many times. And, it's like, there's nothing here. I mean, I can't see doing this. This is nuts. Had a pretty nice career going. Pulitzer Prize, Harvard tenure, yeah. Done a lot of great work. He's a great man. He's a great man by the time he was 50. But finally, I think he got asked about it so often, and then somebody said, look, why don't you just go down to New York? The leading abduction researcher in the world is operating there, and go down and talk to Bud Hopkins. And so he did. And he came down. Now, I may get some of the details wrong, but the key is he goes down and he goes to Bud's place, and he gets in there. And they obviously talk for a little bit or something, and then I think obviously at some point John is saying, well, Bud, is there anything to this? And Bud did something that was sheer brilliance, okay? Because he was who he was, and of course, and this happened later on to Whitley Strieber, and it's happened to everyone that's got in this field that's notable, but he was getting letters from all over the world. Thousands of them were coming in because people found out, and they wanted to tell him the story. And he couldn't deal with it. He get no more answer to these than fly in the moon, so he stored them in the closet, unopened. And so he said to John, he said, John, tell you what, go to the closet, go in there, and pick 3 letters at random, open them, and read them. And so John did. He went over there, he picked 3 at random, and he read these letters. And that was it, right? He knew instantly. And so John, very soon after that, gets going, and he gets his friend Dr. Pritchard at MIT to help arrange the MIT study conference, which wasn't endorsed by MIT, but they were brilliant enough to put the name on the book. So, see, this is what you got to do, right? So they hold, and then he writes He starts writing abduction. Well, sometime in that period, he talks about, now understand, we're talking John Mack now. We're talking a great man at Harvard who has friends and acquaintances of substance all over the world. He had dinner one night with an esteemed colleague at Harvard, somebody he'd known his whole life. And I don't have the name, and it doesn't matter. Person comes over, and they're just eating alone at a dining table. So it's a standard day. So he's at one end, the other guy's at the other end. And very quickly, the conversation turned to what John was doing. And basically what this colleague had to say was that, I can't deal with that. I can't handle this. I can't relate to this. And the relationship ended. Right? Why couldn't he deal with that? All right? You know, we've already talked about it, haven't we? And I'll close with this. This is the one ridicule thing that's my favorite personal thing. And if you went to the X conference, you've already heard this. But most of you haven't, so I get to say it again. And this, I love this, and I'm going to have so much fun with this. Back in '98, I think, I'm doing my thing. You know, I'm sending out all this stuff and to the media and the press, and of course, I'm really focused on the Washington Post, who I'm determined to bring down. You know, before this is over, I'm going to wrestle them to the ground. And but the point is that I sent something, you know, I thought was particularly sagacious to David Von Driel, who at that time was the style section editor. And the style section is a good place to get this stuff. And normally I don't get a response, but in this case, about 2 days later, I get a fax comes back, you know. And as I said at the X conference, I still have this, because I had an old fax machine, you know, and it's this thermal paper, you know, and it's like 7 years old now, and you tear it off, and it's going brown, right? But I have it. And it was a short, pithy response from editor Von Driel. He's now just a writer. And he said, Dear Mr. Bassett, there are no extraterrestrials, but if you should find one, bring him in and we'll do a story on him. Now, I'm going to tell you now, plan ahead. It ain't going to be very long. You're going to see me on TV, okay? Some interview, it may be post-disclosure, and I'm hauling out that thermal fax paper, and I'm going to hold it up, right? And David is going to get a little sting. Right? Not because I don't like him. He's a perfectly fine man. But you have to understand, the reason this issue is where it is because 1,000 David Von Driels have defaulted to that mode. He just happened to send a fax that I could keep.
What's that? Yeah, make it quick, though, because, yeah, we're getting long on time.
Okay, this will be quick. This is kind of a giggle factor thing. At the end of my 6-year study at NASA into the UFO phenomena, there were so many open discussions between myself and Dr. Joseph Knuth III and other astrophysicists over at NASA. Knuth was the head of astrochemistry at NASA at Goddard. That we got to the point that we said the only way we're going to solve this is if we put me on the space shuttle, and I go out there with an infrared camera and an ultraviolet camera, and I do studies as a ufologist, and I come back and report to the American public. And I said, if you're right on your arguments, I will concede, because I'll get to look through the cameras myself. I've got 20 years experience as a photographer, and we'll solve this. But the only way we're going to do it is to get on the shuttle. And I mentioned that point on the Fox News segment, which I'll show tomorrow night, and everybody laughed on the show because they said, of course you'll never get into space. But then Dr. Knuth wrote me back and he said, there is one way you could get on the shuttle to do this. And he said, and that is if you get enough signatures from the American public who say that they think that a ufologist should go on the space shuttle and conduct an investigation looking in the infrared and the ultraviolet, he said you could actually end up there. So I just wanted to put that idea out there, that it's possible. It's possible.
Right on. I'll sign it. I know it's getting long on time, and we all need to bring this to a conclusion, and I'm going to ask the panel to limit your answers to about 2 to 4 minutes apiece. And I heard the giggle. It's out there, see? And the question is, okay, what do we do about it? How do we combat the giggle factor? How do we combat the ridicule? And not so much on a personal level, but it'll certainly be at dealing with the press and maybe dealing with the government. And we'll start with you, Steve, if that's okay.
Me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, it's simple.
2 to 4 minutes, buddy. That's it.
Oh boy. If you live in a real ghetto with walls and you keep smashing into it, you'll hurt yourself. Break an arm, break an elbow, whatever. If you try to climb it, you fall and die. And if they've got people on the towers with guns, they'll shoot you. The ridicule wall is made of nothing. It's nothing in the head. Okay? There's nothing solid there. You can walk through it. It's as thin as paper. And so it is, in fact, a mental construct. If you buy it, it's a wall. If you don't, it's not there. So you do. I'll give you one example. Every time you find yourself at a campaign rally, any other presentation involving a candidate, either for a federal, state, or a federal office, and by state or presidency, every time you're in that position and you can get to the microphone, you go to the microphone and you say, what is your position regarding the extraterrestrial presence and or the truth embargo, and what do you think of Colonel Corso's book, or any other question like that? And then you just sit there and wait for the answer. If they laugh, ignore it. It's irrelevant. Ask the question again. And if they don't answer at all, politely leave and wait for the next opportunity to ask the next question. Okay? That ridicule wall is only there if you believe it's there. They're the one making a fool of themselves, but the sheer act of asking the question is breaking the wall down. Charles Huffer got one question in on CNN under Bush, and that rocketed around the world. If there'd been 20 questions over that campaign, who knows what would have happened? So the wall is just an illusion. Ask the candidates the question. Ask the press the question. Don't get mad when they laugh. Just continue on. And eventually, you'll get your results. You'll get what you want.
John Greenwald?
You know, I think really how you combat that is you continue on the trek of offering the proof, or our quest for the knowledge. We offer that proof, whether it be by documentation or photographs, and we do what we believe is true, not only to the field, but to ourselves. And if we do that, they're going to listen. Now, does it matter if Bob, yes, there is a Bob. Does it matter if Bob makes that joke? No. Because not everybody that's watching are making those jokes. If you can reach 2 people out of the 2 million that see it, that's 2 more than knew about it yesterday. When Fox did a couple stories on my stuff, and even, you know, when you see stuff that's done on the Mexico footage, which I have no experience with, or whatever it might be, regardless of the jokes at the end of that newscast, there's somebody in the audience listening. If they're in the field and already interested, great, they're a little bit more knowledgeable about it. But again, if you grab a couple more eyes and ears and brains to come into this field, you're going to be successful sooner or later. There's no reason to go ahead and just get the negative spin on the media and how to, you know, well, they're not doing their job. They're not. They're not putting the investigation that they should be into this. But we know what we want to find, and that's the truth. That's why we're here. When I do my talk on Sunday, and you'll see from every talk throughout the whole weekend, you're going to see evidence. Do you care if some newscaster makes a joke about it? I don't. Because you're here to learn. And like I said, to reiterate, those people that are listening on those newscasts are watching those newscasts to learn. And I really don't believe that giggle factor plays a role with everybody. With a lot of people, it does. And with those people, they don't care enough to learn. And if they don't care enough to learn, I don't think we need them in the field anyway.
Right on. David?
I think that we need to have the same kind of seriousness that this conference will present in Congress. I think if we fight for Congress to hold actual hearings into the phenomena and allow all researchers to give up to 4 hours of testimony and make those hearings public on ESPN or any of these stations, I think that's what it's going to take. So those who are politically motivated, I think we need to, take it seriously, actually get out there, get in Washington, and create the initiative for congressional hearings into the UFO phenomena. That's what it's going to take.
Right on. Right on. That's true. John?
Well, you're probably all thinking of an answer to that question yourselves, and probably most of them are different. But let's look at it this way. I'm a futurist. I studied the future in the technology field. And that's not being a seer, so to say. You study the past, you learn from the past, you project where the future should go, then you work for that future. And then in that way, you influence the future. You don't try to worry about these people that want to be jokers. When it comes to hearings, just recently, Senator Orrin Hatch said, there will be no hearings on UFOs. I can guarantee it. So are you going to go running at Orrin Hatch anymore? No. Go to the people that have some sense and go around them. And don't play the victim game. Don't play the loser game. Stay in command. Don't lose your cool. You've got the information. Almost anybody in this audience has sufficient information to go up against any of these people that want to play that game. But don't play their game. Change the game in your favor, in the favor of what we're trying to accomplish. And that way, you will be successful. The positive approach eventually wins, whether they like it or not. And if we're all lucky, maybe we'll get a little help from out there somewhere.
Right on. Just to dovetail a little bit what John Schuessler spoke about in his closing statement, and I don't know how many of you out there do not receive the MUFON journal, because if you don't, you're missing out. Missing out on a lot of things, a lot of information, a lot of facts, but more importantly, there's a gentleman that writes an article that appears in the back of the magazine that I look forward to every month. Not only does it have humor and wit, but it is very well written, and it also gives you some insight in how to deal with this very topic of ridicule and debunking. And that's Stanton Friedman. I truly, sir, enjoy your article. Thank you very much. Top shelf. Top shelf. Absolutely. You're a hero of mine, by the way. I tell everybody that. Okay? Even though you're not an apologist, you Absolutely. Thank you very much. I understand that some people filled out some cards with questions. For the most part, we're done with the discussion. If there's any questions out there that you feel you would like to have addressed or by the panel, by all means, ask them. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what the individual panel members think is the reason that our government covers all this up.
For those that couldn't hear in the back, the question was for the panel members is why or what the reason is that our government does the cover-up. That's a pretty involved and pretty detailed question, so I'm going to ask the panel members to limit the answer because I know we're getting long, but John Greenwald, you want to handle that one first? I like picking on you anyway.
All right, me first. Why do they do it? I think it's a couple factors. I think one of the biggest ones is honestly fear. And operating off of the assumption that this is the ET phenomenon as we are studying it and some of us believing it, you have to ask yourself the question, who does society feel is number one, technologically advanced, number one, and that would be the United States. When you start dealing with civilizations, and we've become comfortable with that. We know we're going to win the wars that we get into. Why? Because our military is more advanced, our technology is more advanced, and so on. And we have been the number one. We've been the front runner for quite some time. When you start dealing then under the assumption that this is real, you then have a civilization that is so far beyond what we have come to know as number one. There's going to be a lot of scared people. Many years ago, I forget the exact year, and I've asked this question a few times, how many people in the room really heard of the Heaven's Gate cult before they committed suicide? Not many people. 97, I guess it was. Not many people heard of that. And then all of a sudden, if it comes out that there are advanced civilizations that have traveled light years to get here and that are more advanced, and if they have the technology to get here, what are their weapons like? And then that fear is going to be instilled. Maybe you and I can handle it. I know I can. It wouldn't be a problem. But you're going to have a lot of religious beliefs that are going to be in turmoil. You're going to have a lot of personal beliefs that are going to be thrown out of whack. I mean, if you believe something very strongly for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and then you get something thrown into your life that completely contradicts it, You know, there's that fear factor in the government that if you have X amount of people in the United States, however many people it might be, that are going to freak out over this, you're going to have a lot of unrest. So I think, you know, there's a couple other factors, but I think that would be the main one, would be fear. You know, and many have brought up the War of the World scenario. You know, look what happened. There was panic, there was looting, there was riot, and whatever happened, you know, and that wasn't even real. So think about what happens if they really came out on the radio or the television and said, well, sorry guys, we've been lying to you for 50 years. ETs are here. They've been taking people, planting things in their ears, their arms, their legs, and so on. And yeah, you guys were right. I think a lot of people would be fairly upset.
In the interest of time, and just so that we can, kind of bring this to a conclusion, I'm just going to ask one other panel member to respond to that question, and then if there's any other questions, we'll subject the other two panel members to answering that question. So, David, do you want to handle that?
Well, we just have to remember the Space Act signed by NASA in 1958, that NASA originally anticipated contact with extraterrestrial civilizations when they created the space program. They really thought they were going to find it. But in the Space Act, there is the creation of the law that states that they would not share everything with the American public unless they could certify that there was no threat to national security if they had made contact with extraterrestrials. And I think until they can guarantee that we are not in any way under threat or intimidation, they will not share that information with us. That is what the Space Act states. I believe, again, it's about fear. It's also about what John just said. When you realize that we are an inferior position, we do not have air superiority over this race of intelligent beings. I mean, why would our government say, hi, sorry, we're not in control anymore. There's somebody else who has a greater power than us. And that alone could cause a collapse of our civilization if we really come to that point, that they have the ability to usurp our military. And there are many incidences, such as the takeover of the nuclear missile silos, that indicate they have the ability to usurp our military forces, and that's terrifying. So I think that is probably the main reason.
Okay. I've been handed some questions here from the audience, and one of them that I have here kind of piques my interest, and the question is the press, especially the TV, being controlled or manipulated by the federal government concerning this topic? And I'm going to ask Steve here to address that. I know that he's passionate about that.
Short answer. These are the issues. During the Cold War, it was well known that intelligence operatives were assigned jobs at most of the major newspapers and networks. Absolutely known. Dan Sheehan can talk all night about that. They were there to be called on when needed, keep track of what's going on, that kind of thing. It was wrong, shouldn't have done it, and when they got away with it, it just incited them to do something else. Point one. Point two, overall, the vast majority of the media is contained by the ridicule curtain, okay? Works fine for them, just as everybody else. I believe the third issue is that the massive media consolidation under corporate umbrellas has been a given delimiter. The fact that some of those corporations are defense contractors is worth noting. And yes, I believe that deals were struck between certain entities and the government military intelligence complex. I'm pretty sure, and I would love, to be sued by the Washington Post over this. We're lucky. I believe the Washington Post has a deal. It's one of the best papers in the world. I've been reading it since I was 10 or whatever. And it's a great paper. It's just a fabulous paper. It's great people working for it. It's blown this issue 8 ways to Sunday. Deal was struck. Namely, you want to cover the world, you want to cover the United States government, which is bigger than the Roman Empire, you need our help. You need our inside sources, our unnamed sources, our off-the-record sources. You know what I'm talking about. Get the news. What's happening here? What's happening there? You want to talk about UFOs? You can go dig through our trash. I believe a deal was struck with Kay Graham. When Kay Graham turned 75 years old, the fine, distinguished publisher of the Washington Post took it over after her husband committed suicide. Her birthday party was held at an institution in town. There are at least 10,000 possibilities that they might have held her very important 75th birthday, that could have held been the venue The venue was, in fact, the CIA headquarters. Point QED.
Right on. John, the question is the media being controlled by the federal government? Are they being manipulated, or is it covert, direct, or what? On this issue, yes.
That's a difficult question to answer when you're not in the media, and I'm not. I can only observe the media. And what is the media? It's a whole vast thing out there that includes television broadcasting, radio broadcasting, print news, magazine production, etc. Is it being manipulated? Let's go back to a much smaller level. Let's go back to the White House and the staff corps that monitors the White House. The staff corps never gets out of bed when it comes to asking questions. If they embarrass the president, they usually aren't in the staff corps the next week. Is that manipulation? Darn right it is. If you can't ask a free press question right at the White House level, that gives you a demonstration of what the mindset is at the total government level and where it must waterfall down. Now, I know a lot of press people, and I don't think they feel manipulated particularly. Some do when they take a story in and their editor slashes it and said, this doesn't fit what our owner or our editor likes to see. We had a member of our organization in St. Louis, Missouri that worked for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He set print type. Every UFO story that came across the teletype, he put into typeset. Brought it up to the editor. The editor every day slash it and throw it out. Didn't matter what it said. So the editor was controlling. Who made him control it? Maybe his boss said, I don't like that subject, so don't report on it. I don't know. But I do know at the level of the guy that said it, he could never get a story in. So there are controls. Who puts them on, whether they're self-imposed, whether they're by personal opinions of owners and editors and the like, quite possibly. You know, any of you that run a business has certain things you accept and don't accept, regardless of what your business is, and your employees are going to follow that if they're going to stay your employees very long, unless you're an awfully modern manager. And many people in these businesses are not modern managers. They're bottom line driven, they're hard, they don't really care what you think. So I think there's a control, but I don't know how covert it is or how overt it is.
You know, and you mentioned something earlier tonight in the discussion, and I thought it was really imperative to reiterate it. And that is, you can clue in on any channel and see the same news broadcast. There isn't any variety. There isn't any change. They all take their commercials at the same time, and they all report the same story. There may be a little deviation when that story airs, but pretty much it's all the same on all 4 or 3 channels, no matter what you watch. Whether that's an indication or not as to whether or not the news is being manipulated and being fed to us, I don't know, but I think it's an interesting point to be made. The last question that I'm going to take, and I find this is pretty interesting, and I don't know who wrote this, but I've wondered this myself, and I don't have the answer, so I'll tell you that right up front. It says, in the past, people who witnessed an event, i.e. a UFO or flying saucer, were threatened by the military if they talked. In this modern age, has anyone been punished for coming forward with disclosure while being in the military? I don't know. And I'll just throw this question out onto the panel. Does anybody have any information or any insight into that?
Has anybody been threatened who is a member of the military?
Well, it doesn't say, but I think it would be military or non-military for that matter. Have they been threatened by our government in the modern age? It says in the past. But I don't know of any instances in just in the recent. Okay, go ahead.
This is one of the stories I'm looking forward to learning more about post-disclosure. This is going to be fascinating history. Hopefully there's enough records left and enough people that'll talk. Really, a good deal of the history of the second half of the 20th century is going to be rewritten. You understand that? I mean, virtually. Every area is going to be rewritten one way or another. No one has ever been convicted. No member of any intelligence agency has ever been convicted for doing harm to an American citizen. Never happened. And it may never happen. If they want you dead, you are dead. Okay? You will not get justice. There will be no trial. Period. They have that kind of power. That's why we have the restraints and the constitutional balances and everything else. And without it, folks, you know how powerful governments are. Some idiot like Saddam Hussein can do what he does because the state is powerful. Over the years, they've done plenty of harm. They've murdered people, I'm sure of that. They've murdered researchers. They've murdered a few journalists. They destroyed a few careers. The Men in Black are real. There's no question about that.
Sure announced Dan Aykroyd's movie.
And it varies over time. In other words, it comes in spurts. And I think what happens is that something will start to get a little sensitive, get a little intense, and a particular group within a particular agency will go wet. Not everybody, just one group, they go wet. And some things happen, and then it stops, and things go by, and things start to emerge. I believe the latest bout of wetness, you all know what I mean when I say wetness. The teams in the intelligence community, this is generally consistent across the agencies, that go out and do messy business are called wet teams. When Bill Clinton miraculously, in spite of the wrath of God and everything else coming down upon him, still won the second term, right? And the politics of UFOs the politics of disclosure was advancing. And he was a lame duck president who had now been through plenty and was mad as hell. The inside people were well aware of the Rockefeller Initiative. They were well aware of his instructions to Webster Hubbell. They were well aware of the meetings between Clinton and Lawrence Rockefeller. They're well aware of all of it. They were absolutely petrified that Clinton, who was universally despised by virtually everybody in the military complex, the military intelligence complex, would be the disclosure president. I mean, it was just, couldn't happen, okay? Believe me, I'm not making this up. In the first months of the Clinton administration, they had to send out an edict to the armed forces because too many line officers were insulting the president in front of their own troops. That's how bad it was. So, in around the period of 1996, Art Bell decides to go political. Because he didn't like politics, but he decides to go political, and he starts bringing in people on this subject, including me. And so we got millions of people are hearing this stuff being talked. I actually produced 4 or 5 of the shows on this. They're called disclosure shows. They were done every January of each year. We had Mitchell on. We had all these people on. And things were happening. Greer was doing his stuff. There was a lot going on. And then and so he wins the election in 96. It's now 97, and early in 97, things started happening. And I started to notice it. I'm not the only one. I actually created a section of my website called the Paradigm Clock called the Health Watch, and I was tracking what was happening to people and only a fraction of the stuff that was going on. And in the period from 97 to late 99, there was a series of heart attacks, cancers, deaths, melanomas, and heart arrhythmias. The 2 webmasters of the most prominent and important sites in the field both came down with heart arrhythmia attacks in a short span of time. Richard Hoagland had a heart attack out of nowhere that they couldn't explain. But Hopkins had a heart attack. Stephen Schiff, who had gone public in 97 with his concerns and with his efforts to do his job regarding the Roswell records, within 12 months of going public on the Larry King Show, came down with a squamous cell cancer of the earlobe. Okay? I've had 2 squamous cell cancers. Greer had 2 melanomas. I mean, they had to cut those out with a trench hoe. But he just had a squamous cell cancer. They tried everything, couldn't cure it. Went in the nerve, straight in his brain, he was dead.
He was a congressman from New Mexico.
Congressman of New Mexico. I can go on. I believe, and it's my opinion only, that certain element in the government went wet from early 97 to the end of 99. This is not pleasant stuff. I think we need to know this eventually. I don't think it needs to dominate our thinking in the post-disclosure world, right? South Africa was able to move from apartheid into a democratic state with reasonable growth and stability, in spite of things done to those people that far exceed anything the CIA ever did to you or us. Right? So we're going to have to get over it. But I would like to know about it. It's a history we need to know. But I think that's the last time they went. Once they knew that Clinton was not going to act, that he was going to lose, and after the big, huge mass of money started coming together in Texas to elect George Bush, the son of the president they wanted to be the disclosure president, it stopped. Now, if you want to know what's happening after that, you got to come listen to me tomorrow at 10:45.
I've just been informed that we're down to about 3 minutes on the tape. I would just like to say that just recently the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that if you tell the truth, and it is the truth, you cannot be held civilly or liably criminally for telling the truth. That doesn't mean you can't be sued, because you can be sued for anything, for any reason, by anyone at any time. But the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that if you're speaking the truth, and I go back to my opening statement, that's all I want. I want the truth. I may not like it, and sometimes I don't, but I want it just the same, and then I'll take it from there. I think that does it, gentlemen. Hey, thanks for your attention. Thanks for... By the way, this is my first time at being a moderator, so... I just want to remind everybody that the Dan Aykroyd video, is it a video?
Yeah, this video, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. I did an hour and 15-minute interview with Dan Aykroyd